I just showed you the shocker $13 million Bitcoin forecast. That gets us to 13% of the capital in 2045. We have two strategies. Expand our currency to dominate the world with the digital currency of choice. Expand our capital to dominate the world with the digital capital of choice. Why should the U.S. want to be the Bitcoin superpower?
Hey guys, welcome to Everyday Finance. Don't believe that the Bitcoin crash is the end. In actuality, this crash is what ultimately led to Bitcoin's meteoric rise as markets plummet and fear spreads. Bitcoin is positioning itself for the ultimate comeback while the rest of the world is in a panic. Seeing this coming, MicroStrategy CEO Michael Saylor is fully committed to Bitcoin and remains steadfast in his conviction that it is the financial weapon of the future, not merely a hedge against inflation. Bitcoin is the only currency that is impervious to manipulation and destruction as established systems collapse under the weight of debt and corruption. Being sovereign money, it gives people the ability to escape the control of banks and governments. The man who predicted the 2008 crash, Robert Kiyosaki, is doubling down on Bitcoin while everyone else is selling out of fear. He recently tweeted that he will be purchasing more Bitcoin when it crashes because he is aware of something that the typical investor is unaware of. Bitcoin will recover more quickly than any other asset when the everything bubble bursts. It will not merely recover, rather it will soar to unprecedented heights. What was Kiyosaki's post-crash plan? Easy. Increase your Bitcoin holdings, remain steady, and take advantage of the recovery wave. He is setting himself up for the greatest opportunity of his career, while others panic and liquidate their assets. The goal is long-term financial freedom, not immediate profits. The rise of Bitcoin is just getting started. Let's examine Michael Saylor's observations to gain a better understanding of what lies ahead.
Our assumptions? Well, Bitcoin's currently 22 basis points of the global economy. That's $2 trillion. Over 20 years, right now it's been growing about 60% a year. If it decelerates from 60% a year to 20% a year, the average return is going to be 29% a year over the 20 years. That is the base case. That arrives at a price of $13 million of Bitcoin in USD terms, or $280 trillion in the network. Does the world turn upside down? No. What happens? Well, everything pretty much stays the same, except for those that embrace Bitcoin get rich and powerful. Those that don't embrace Bitcoin get weaker and poorer. Otherwise, everything that you see in the world today will still be there in the world in 20 years. Bitcoin is not a threat to the dollar. The dollar is currency. Bitcoin is capital. In the modern world, there are plenty of academic economists. They will just recite ad infinitum. Well, money is a store of value, a medium of exchange, a unit of account. There, I told you. And they just haven't really thought about that past just rote memory. This is why you shouldn't rote memorize stuff in education. Think a little bit harder about what's going on here. If you need money for the next 4 weeks in Argentina, then you're using the peso. If you need money for the next 4 years in Argentina, you're using the dollar. If you need money for the next 40 years in Argentina and you're smart, you're using the Bitcoin. And so the dollar is competing, but is competing against the M2 money supply of the CNY, Chinese currency, European currency, Japanese currency. Right now we're about 17% of that. We should be able to grow to 30% of that. How? With digital currency. If U.S. banks and U.S. corporations can issue digital currencies backed by the U.S. Treasury, we will expand that supply of U.S. currency by $10 trillion, right? That's a digital asset strategy. That's why the stablecoin bill and the Genius Act matter. It is not capital. Bitcoin is less than 1% of the capital of the world. What does it compete with? Not the dollar. Bitcoin competes with property, equity and bonds. Property, equity, and bonds. And what is it? It's 1%. And what is it going to? I just showed you the shocker $13 million Bitcoin forecast. That gets us to 13% of the capital in 2045. We have two strategies. Expand our currency to dominate the world with the digital currency of choice. Expand our capital to dominate the world with the digital capital of choice. Why should the U.S. want to be the Bitcoin superpower? You cannot remain a sovereign nation if you lose control of your airspace, outer space, or cyberspace. This is a truism. It's pretty important. We're not talking about making a little bit of money here. We're talking about defending the American way of life. A superpower has to keep the air routes open. You must be able to fly, not just fly from here to London. You need to be able to fly from New York to Chicago. If you look at what happened in the first Gulf War, we took control of Iraqi airspace. Within a week, their entire country was non-functioning. Some people would say within 48 hours they were non-functioning. This country won't function for 48 hours after we lose control of our airspace. How do we protect it? We have Air Force bases. We have military aircraft. This is evolving. It will continue to evolve. Drones, very sophisticated defense systems. We have to keep open our sea lanes. This is a truism for 1,000 years. The Carthaginians knew it. That's why the Romans destroyed them. The Carthaginians had destroyed the Venetian fleet. Every single port in the Mediterranean that was a Venetian port was also a Roman port, was also a Carthaginian port, was also a Phoenician port. Why? Because you must keep the sea lanes open if you would be a superpower. If I cut off your sea lanes, I choke your economy. The Japanese determined this or found this out in World War II. Sea power requires naval bases operating appropriate ships. A superpower has to keep its cyber channels open. What does that mean? It means your communication channels for digital information, but it also means your communication channels for digital energy. I need to be able to move a signal, but I need to move a $10 billion chunk of money. I don't just need to keep the cyber channels open around the world. It's not just I want to move that information or that energy between New York and Tokyo. If I lose control of cyberspace over the United States, I can't move information between New York and Chicago, right? You lose cyberspace, you'll lose your own digital economy. What would you do if your enemy got control of your cyberspace? You saw just, again, yesterday, you can't even log into X. Well, what happens when you can't log into your bank account? Cyber power requires Bitcoin miners operating ASICs, throwing up a wall of digital energy. And you want to hope that more than 50% of that is controlled by you or your
What Michael Saylor
allies.
and Robert Kiyosaki have to say about Bitcoin is going to blow your mind. And they are on the same page. Despite the market being shaken by the crypto crash, both of these titans of finance are doubling down on Bitcoin. According to Kiyosaki, the crash is only the beginning of Bitcoin's full potential. When all is said and done, he believes that Bitcoin will rise more quickly than anything else, and he is not selling. He's purchasing more instead. Why? Due to the fact that Bitcoin is a financial revolution. According to Saylor, Bitcoin, which is based on the unwavering ideals of integrity and sovereignty, is the most potent conservative force in the world. Its integrity is ensured by a hard cap of 21 million bitcoins, making it impervious to inflation or bank and government manipulation. Even more radical is Bitcoin's sovereignty, which allows people to fully manage their wealth without the involvement of middlemen or the dishonest financial system. Saylor and Kiyosaki concur that Bitcoin will rebound from market crashes the quickest and reach new highs, surpassing more conventional assets like stocks and real estate. Since Bitcoin is the foundation of the next financial order, now is the time to buy more. To learn more, let's examine some of the more in-depth excerpts from their interview.
Embrace Bitcoin, we own the 21st century. All the money, all the capital of the world is moving out of the 20th century. Everything that made sense, every educated financier was educated in the 20th century. They were taught a bunch of bromides, a bunch of rules. All of those rules probably made sense in the 20th century. The way we fought World War II is not the way we fight World War III. Every military doctrine, every financial doctrine, it might have been right at one point. It's not right any longer. Trillions of dollars of capital is going to flow from those physical and financial assets into digital, into the Bitcoin network. Okay, you might say, well, I'm making a strong assertion. Bitcoin is the digital capital network. I'm not just the one making that assertion. The President of the United States made that assertion last week, explained by David Sachs on Friday night. He said, Bitcoin is the only crypto asset that is truly decentralized. It is special. Maybe in the future, there might be some other digital capital. The US government doesn't recognize any other digital capital, nor do we. And that's because 99% of the power in the crypto ecosystem is in the Bitcoin network. If you want to own cyberspace and own the future, you need to own it. Embrace Bitcoin and strengthen the dollar. We have the chance to establish, own, and control the global digital capital network. That is Bitcoin. We can back the US dollar with Bitcoin reserves, the only monetary asset that is competitive to the dollar. If I need a liquid fungible asset to capitalize a company or an institution, it's not real estate, it's not natural gas, it's not art, it's not private and public equity portfolios, it's not even going to be an index of equity. The only asset that I can use other than Bitcoin is US Treasuries everywhere in the world. If anybody ever decides to replace those, they'll replace them with Bitcoin. We should own both. Embrace Bitcoin, attract foreign capital. It's not just we're getting the 20th century money, we're getting the rest of the world's money. If I gave you money, if I took all your money, I dropped you in Africa and I said, you got to invest in a diversified portfolio of private and public equity and real estate or in Africa, or you can put your money into the digital capital network and move it anywhere else at the speed of light, and I gave you a choice to punch the orange button or leave it in Africa for 100 years, you would punch the orange button. Everybody else in the world's figuring out the same thing right now. That's why countries will make laws against it. That's why the Chinese have export controls on their capital. All of the capital will flow into the US. But if you can't physically come to the US, the next best thing is you flow into the digital capital network and you get all the protections of the US. And finally, you embrace Bitcoin, you empower Americans. It's American companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet. They're going to outlast, outperform, and outlive their competitors. So American institutions that are holding Bitcoin, they're going to enrich their shareholders. The beneficiaries are us. And the last point, with the appropriate digital assets framework, we can become the bankers to the world. Right? When we export Bitcoin to the world, we're exporting our values: sovereignty, sound money, integrity, property rights. When we export digital currency, we're literally exporting our currency. If we create other digital securities or digital tokens, we'll be exporting our companies, our ideas, our securities, our financial products to the world. We can dominate this industry.
Michael Saylor claims that governments, large banks, and trillion-dollar corporations are fiercely competing with 40 million American businesses. He thinks that by allowing companies to become independent of banks, currencies, and politicians, Bitcoin provides a solution. Saylor cited MicroStrategy's own transition from US Treasury bonds to Bitcoin, which significantly increased the value of his business. He underlined that, because of its decentralized structure and international money flows, Bitcoin yields an annual return of 60%. Saylor contends that Bitcoin allows people and companies to keep their wealth out of the hands of governing bodies and influential organizations. According to him, it represents a significant change in the power dynamics, allowing individuals to exert control over their financial resources. Saylor also emphasized how Bitcoin protects wealth from central planning and government overreach by promoting economic freedom. According to him, Bitcoin will be a durable digital currency that keeps wealth intact for future generations. Author Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad Poor Dad expressed worries about an imminent economic collapse on social media. He thinks that gold, silver, Bitcoin, stocks, bonds, and real estate will all be affected by a huge everything bubble crash. According to Kiyosaki, he expects Bitcoin to rebound quickly, so if its price drops, he intends to purchase more. He blames the impending catastrophe on counterfeit fiat currency, which benefits the rich at the expense of the poor. He considers Bitcoin, silver, and gold to be real money and suggests investing in them as a means of achieving financial independence. What impact do you believe Bitcoin will have on the direction of economic independence and freedom in the future? Tell us in the comments section below. Remember to subscribe, like, and share for more thought-provoking content. Thank you for watching.